The growth of new media has utterly transformed the process of journalism. And it's not just in terms of the way that news is produced, it's not in terms of the way that content we're receiving, but it's also the entire business model that underpins news organizations. This has fundamentally also transformed what it means to be a journalist today. There are all sorts of responsibilities and requirements that they have with their job that journalists from another age would never have been able to comprehend. And what's really interesting about what's happening at the moment is we also have to think about the way in which citizens are receiving and accessing news. This is completely different. There is a very contested landscape of information now. So news organizations are fighting for voice in this environment. So that is something that is absolutely different from before. And within that, citizens have a lot of choice. And previously, traditional media organizations were a kind of gatekeeper for this information. But now they're just one voice in a bigger pool. Populism presents a really profound challenge to the traditional dynamics that play between media and politics. This is partly because many populists position themselves as anti-establishment candidates, and they'd like to bundle the media in as part of this establishment. So previously, journalists could wield power with good coverage and also with bad coverage. These would have negative effects on the party or candidate. But for populists, this can actually galvanize their message. It reinforces the sense of a kind of conspiracy of the establishment against these outside voices who are claiming to represent the will of the people. So this is an area in which the media is really struggling against populists and the rise of populism as a general force in our political cultures. And this has been evident in quite a few different countries, and it's certainly been evident in Britain as well. The European referendum was a real watershed moment in British politics, and there are a number of lessons that we can learn from our research into this with journalists who were there on the front line of the campaign. The first is that many journalists themselves did not feel adequately educated about a lot of the topics and issues that came into play. The European Union is a profoundly complex institution, and the question of our relationship with the EU now and in the future was always going to be incredibly complicated. The second thing is that I think a lot of the public broadcasters in particular were really challenged by the environment in terms of the imbalance between the two campaigns and their kind of institutional relationships. A lot of public broadcasters, particularly the BBC, has a mandate for balance, and the way in which they could interpret this sense of balance when you have, for example, the governor of the Bank of England needing to put them up against a candidate of similar stature when there were quite variations in the institutional support for each of the campaigns was a huge challenge. And I think the third thing is that a lot of news organizations tried to apply a framework of a general election campaign to a referendum, and it was a really different circumstance. I think a lot of journalists that we spoke to on reflection look back and wish that they'd done things differently. Whether or not journalism was able to swing the outcome is a bigger question, but I think certainly we will be studying the way in which this campaign was reported for many years to come.